Fletcher Neiman is a drummer who's enrolled at a prestigious music school in New York City. He's selected by Fletcher, the top band director, to join his band, but Fletcher is abusive and brutal. Fletcher pushed Neiman really hard to strive for perfection, and Neiman is obsessed with Fletcher and his approval, and so he pushes himself even harder. Neiman gets Fletcher fired in a testimony after they have a bad performance for Fletcher's poor treatment of Neiman. Then Fletcher sets Neiman up to fail in a high-profile concert, but then Neiman finally achieves a good drum solo and earns Fletcher's approval.
Some of the characters from Whiplash are Neiman, who's the ambitious drummer who deals with isolation and mental struggle as he tries to achieve perfectionism in Fletcher's eyes. Fletcher is his abusive instructor who pushes him towards his perfection and beyond normal limits, and he's a manipulative guy. Nicole is Neiman's ex-girlfriend in the story, and when she gets broken up with from Neiman, it kind of shows Neiman self-destructing with isolation. And finally, there's Andrew's family, who he also isolates from.
According to Forbes, the director's vision shows how the person's drive plus instruction can lead to isolation from the world, personal experience for the director. The fast pace that adds attention to the film, placing the musical notes and tempo of the music. Like jazz, you must experience the film to note subtitles and nuances.
Whiplash is filled with mise-en-scène. One example is the cinematography of when they show the close-up of Neiman's bleeding hands after he practices drumming for a while. This shows Neiman's dedication and drive to drumming, but it also shows the abuse and push of Fletcher.
The week we connected Whiplash with was suffering. So a little context on suffering. According to the suffering packet, suffering is a loss of control in our lives, and it's a basic human need. And some other main points to highlight is that other people can help if we let them help. We can also help others through suffering. And that suffering can hurt, but we can also learn lessons from it. And some of the lessons we learn are through the coping strategies we use, and some of the bad ways are through that. And then there's also resurrection suffering, which is the realizations that are made after. Another source is the language of the cross. And that says that those who follow Jesus will see the suffering of all the people in their life and strive to make them through their suffering. Alright, so to connect the film and week, the first point I took from suffering is that others can help if we let them. And I brought that up with Neiman isolating himself in the suffering, which causes physical and mental strain in it. So one of the quotes is, "We must first recognize that we need help, and then we must ask for it." Neiman never really realizes his struggles, and rather than asking for help, he continues to suffer under the abuse and his strive for perfection. And some examples of this isolation are he cuts off his family, he breaks up with his girlfriend. So those are some of that examples of him not letting other people help, and that's why he continues his suffering. Another point is the coping and like what is suffering. So Neiman doesn't really ever truly learn to cope with his suffering, and he tries to shield himself. And like in the last section, he does that by isolating himself. So Neiman like represses his suffering throughout the film and never truly processes it, which you can see him internalizing his struggle throughout the film, never really realizing his struggle, and instead he takes that as the path to greatness. And then one more point I'd like to highlight is the resurrection scene in suffering. So suffering was not good for Neiman, even though he didn't cope right. At the cost of his mental health and well-being, he does officially seek the approval of Fletcher and finds that at the end. So he kind of finds his own path. And this can be seen to the final drum solo as his resurrection.
A brief reflection with the film and personal influence is that Andrew struggles in his life with the struggles and challenges of being a drummer and expectations and his manager. But it's important to reflect on our lives and see our goals and understand that we'll go through challenges in our own lives and push through those challenges and strive for the largest and the best.
For my reflection on Whiplash, I'm actually going to disagree with Bennett Takavik over there. I think it's important to set goals for yourself, and it's important to reach those goals, but it shouldn't be your whole personality like Neiman makes it. He sets the goal to be the best drummer he can be, and he shuts out everything in his life, and it causes him a lot of pain and suffering, where I would say that he should set the goal to be the best drummer, but also keep a balance of his family and friends.
In my reflection of Whiplash and the personal influence it had on me, I said that most people probably see Whiplash as a film of a man who's enduring tremendous struggle but achieves his goal of greatness. But I think what also could be recognized, as I recognized, is the lesson that Whiplash teaches about suffering and setting goals. So for me, it made me realize that I have to make my goals realistic, especially for me. Further on the line, I'm looking at going into finance, and there's sometimes 90-hour work weeks, so you have to keep your goals realistic as to not isolate yourself and kill your mental well-being.
So the prayer I chose is, in the face of suffering that I cannot change, in the face of death itself, I confront the limits of my own power, even the seeming limits of the strength that comes from God. I become aware that I am the presence of a loving, forgiving God. I offer to God this time prayer and open my heart to all it holds. And this prayer experience exemplifies how, although we cannot control the suffering that we endure, we can control how we attempt to navigate through these times of struggle and how we utilize the strength of ourselves and others. In times of struggle, we find God in these moments. In times of struggle, become the greatest of triumphs.
So I also chose, as Bennett did, that same exact prayer, and I chose to do the impact it had on me. During the experience, I reflected on some of the questions, and I kind of realized I don't always cope with my suffering well. I often bury the suffering inside, and it kind of builds up and comes out all at once. And although I've become better with suffering, I found it helpful to reaching out, like people like my mom, my friends, my girlfriend. When something's wrong, they often help and bring rational thinking into me when I'm having negative thoughts and having issues with coping. They help me rationalize the situation.
I chose to reflect on the same prayer. When reading this prayer, I realized that I do see God when I am suffering the most. But the hard part is not seeing God when I'm suffering the most, but seeing God in all parts of my life. I choose to do this by showing my gifts and using them for the best purpose. And one of my gifts is golf, so I'm going to make this putt.